Hello, everybody. Okay, so welcome to the Reglow space. We're going to start off with entering the plane of imagination with our imagination flag. Standing on the land with the sky above and the sea that surrounds. We call in all the elements of earth, fire, water, and air. And this is the plane of imagination that we'll be creating from. So here we have our mask, the grandmother's velvet garden mask that we've been working on, and the video 6 that we recorded, the audio wasn't working, but we're back now so you can see. Just gonna take a few deep breaths, coming into a pulse of creativity. Ooh, 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 ooh. We have these two flowers. And this netting to attach to a flower here. So let's move over to the iron board. And yeah, feeling into the lives, the essence of these materials. This was a netting from a garlic bag, plastic netting, and it can like stretch. You see here, it can stretch out and it can be torn, so it's not indestructible, but neither are these materials, but that's not really the point. The point is this tending in this space to be present with our own tending too. So this binding originally wrapped around the edges of a tank top that my grandmother passed down to me, and excuse me. So I removed it from that tank top, but I imagine that she gardened in it, and that the binding around the edges of the tank top was a finish that held all the parts in place. So this might have been a finish around the armpit or the armhole and the shoulder, or it might have been a finish around the neck. And so it was just those areas that held and like wrapped around the extremities. So when I talk about any of these storylines and elements they can be applied in this plane of imagination. They can be applied to anything that they come into contact with in any other context. So anything that might hold your head up, anything that might embrace your shoulders to extend your arms in an extension, in an embrace, in your wings that carry your mind in the wind. So before I attach this netting, I want to stitch it down to enclose this seam allowance here. If you can see the seam allowance inside of here, we need to secure that so that it'll be enclosed and held once again in a different form. And so we have our green thread here that was an arm's length sitting on my table, and however, is that the color that we want to stitch through here? Yes. Or it could be yellow, or it could be red. We do have those colors also in arm's length. We also have purple. Yeah, so it's going to be something that we'll see along here, along the veins. I almost want it to be blue because the blue it's like water. We don't really have any other blue in here, but water is also clear and it's reflective of whatever you see. So blue would be reflective of the sky, reflective of our thoughts. It might be reflective of maybe a bluebird. So in this vein, enclosing that seam, it's like the petals are facing upwards, so they would be reflective of whatever is above them. In this case, it's the yellow. So let's go with yellow. And in the last video, I was talking about the colors of yellow and red and green. Well, mostly green and yellow when we were talking about this. Can you see this flower? How do we focus? I thought I put it on like an autofocus, like a quick autofocus. Fast, responsive. Okay, well maybe that was just too close. Can you see? Okay, you can see now the binding around the flower, the back side, when all the colors are coming together to meet in the center of the 5-petal flower. Yeah, I guess that was a whole story that was kind of lost in the last one, but I'm going to put some needles in because I could start from the center and then move in either direction, but then I'd have to make a knot. I'd have to make 2 knots. I'd have to make 4 knots altogether instead of just a start and a finish. So like if I started in the center and moved to the left and then started in the center and moved to the right, in order to evenly distribute the movement of this and the ease of this binding. So if I just put pins here and kind of like put the material in place, then so what I'm doing on this edge, can you see this edge? I'm putting my needle in here, and this is where I'm going to create a knot, anchoring into all layers, just like a tiny little bite. And then I'm going to leave the loop free so that I can wrap my thread around it twice to secure a knot. And then I'm going to do that again. And that's how we anchor our thread. And then I'm going to feel where the seam allowance is and then just stitch right above that, capturing it. And I can take larger stitch lengths on the green side and smaller stitch lengths on the flower side, unless I want it to show through. Like obviously I could make them, one could just stitch however they would like to, and in this case that's my muscle memory and that's what I'm going to be doing, or at least that's what my muscle memory is telling me to do right now. So we're just going to stitch along the edge of this leaf, feeling the seam allowance in here, securing just that. And I could have done a double thread, but I just decided to do a single thread. So when I do a single thread here, you can see there's a tail. I'm just making sure that like the thread there's just like, I'm just holding the tail here like this in my hand so that it doesn't slide out, but I can kind of adjust that depending on how much slack I need. Probably didn't need this long of thread. I think when I cut it I was imagining that I would do a double thread, but then once I started doing it I just did a single. So we're just stitching along here. Blind hems are done, in a way where they just catch maybe like 1 or 2 threads on the visible side of the layers of the material, so that you actually don't even really see the thread. You might see like a faint indent, but then you have enough of them going all along the seam line so that it just holds it in place. And that's an interesting way to think about the invisible world and how it affects our reality. The invisible world, also like the mythologies that surround us in our minds, and then also the stories that encompass the land that we occupy. And so entering into the plane of the imagination doesn't pacify that every land that is occupied by colonial power it doesn't pacify that. I think it just brings us to a space where we can recognize, at least for me, it brings me to a space where I can recognize and be in communion with my own ancestors as my own indigenous ancestors, to earth, and to the matrix of reality, which is in our minds. So now I'm anchoring it down. And so now that's there. And now I can attach this netting. The thing with the netting is that I want to stretch it out as it is in this middle section and place it there. I feel like for this material, since pins won't really hold it in place. Now we cut that thread loop free. Since pins aren't really going to do much, I am going to tack it in place because I can wrap around and secure just with a few stitches. I'm not going to knot it or anything. I'm just going to do a few small stitches to tack it in place instead of instead of using pins. And I'm gonna do this to hold this shaping in place. So and the thread got caught and it actually slid out of the needle, but if that happens, then I can just rethread the needle. And Are there things in your life that you're maybe just holding in place momentarily to maybe like map out your surroundings, and then what is it holding it out in in like an extended or stretched position, or is it holding it in a place that's like contracted? I feel like there are different things, different like aspects of my journey that I do feel expansive, and that are like stretching out, and then there are some aspects of my life that are like contracted, like specific goals and like clearly stated contracts that I've actually created and agreed to. And then there are some areas that are like, we're just holding space for expanding our perception. And that's like there's also our breath, like something that is a continuous rhythm as we grow and continue. I'm doing like every quarter of an inch or something, I'm kind of like mushing it in on itself so that it's kind of like gathering in on the curve, the U-shaped curve and not the N-shaped curve. And this will also create some volume in the green veil. I realize I probably don't have to be cutting my tails for every thing. I can just continue. So maybe if that makes it. Oh, I lost my tail again. So with one hand, I'm guiding the needle and in and out of the stitches, and then the other hand is holding everything in place. Oh, can you? I wonder if I can get a better view of this. Yeah, I think like both movements are definitely essential in crafting our worlds and our experiences as they go from our minds and into and our thoughts and ideas as they like manifest into denser realities. So I kind of finished one side, so you can see here that the shape it creates volume here, and on the other side it's going to have the same kind of thing. So it's going to go up and come down, and then go up and come down. And it has this like elongated, stretched out area. I haven't decided. We're gonna, once this is attached, we can put it on Pipple and then feel out like what the hemline will be. I'm gonna get some more thread. And we're going to scrunchie every like quarter inch or so, just kind of smush it in. And I'm just kind of guessing the amount. Hoping that it will land. I suppose what I could do is just put the end in place and start there. And like put the end where I want it to end, and then I could fill in the center and like evenly distribute everything like that. So let's try that. We're still not making knots, we're just making like small, like 1/16 of an inch, 3 or 4 stitches to hold it in place, starting with the outside, then looking at the center, matching that up to the center, and then we'll distribute it along that way. And if you can hold the tail in place, I'm holding the tail with my thumb. At least for the first couple stitches, so that it doesn't slide out. But then after that, it should be like a temporary holding place. Because once we close up the binding, then it will be more securely held. So now I'm gonna go, I think I have enough to be able to kind of like ease it in now. Zhuzh, zhuzhy, zhuzhy, tacky, tacky, zhuzhy, tacky. Just working with what we've got. basting our seams, basting our connections. Through engagement, through listening, as we connect with our attention, what we focus on is what our reality becomes. So knowing that, how would we choose differently? If we could choose anything, how would it be connected to each other, the air that we share, the water that circulates between us? The words and the stories, the fabric of our culture. If we're expanding in our capacity to love each other, what does that even mean? How do we cultivate love? And like, that's also can be a word that's like restricted, because there's so many other words to describe, like moments of elation or care or tenderness, or even just standing up for something that we believe in, even if nobody else seems to agree with us. Like could be like a willingness to be honest. So that's what we have. We have some volume coming out of the mask. Let's see what's going on with Pipple. Okay. So the idea was for okay. For the power button to be behind the veil. And I like that because when people talk about things that are behind the veil, it's like things that are in this realm of imagination, like in the realm of the other world, of the subconscious, of the dreams. And so how do we get in touch with that power that offers insight into like the fullness and the wholeness of our being? Because behind the mask is like a multi-dimensional being whose identity is like so expansive, and it has like infinite parts to it that are constantly developing and growing and being released and like changing and stuff. So That's what this makes me think of. So there's the shape for, yeah. I might like cut it into a curve. But aside from that, I still need to bind this backside, and I think that that will give it some more stability. I'm using iron board mostly because it's like a higher surface, so I don't have to bend my back down. Okay. So yeah, when we bind it, we can just like tuck all these threads inside here. And I want to use the red thread, and yeah, I'm gonna do a double thread because this is going to be a permanent for this form. So that's where the integrity lies here. I like to, oh, you can't even see, okay. If you can see this, I like to go in, if I want to make the knot right here, let's say, on the edge where the stitch line is going to be, I'm going to go in from the side so that my tails can be enclosed. Like they're going to hang out right now. The tails, the red tails right there, they're going to hang out. But I can cut them off, but it gives me, it allows the knot to have like some, it makes it so that I don't have to cut the tails like right next to the knot, and so that the knot can be more secure. So after I secure the knot, then I can cut the tails off. And that was the same thing that I did with the yellow tail when I was going along that that seam to stabilize the seams of that first stitch when I was joining the binding to the petal. So I can cut both those tails off. And then creating a binding here will create like a ridge of that seam, so it'll also help to give, like, hold shape to the where the volume of the netting is being suspended from, because it's a curve and because the flower material is like not super stiff. It's going to give it some shape because of the amount of layers and like the thickness of the ribbing binding. And okay, if I just hold it right here. So I don't think that we need to like justify why we choose everything in the moment that we choose it, because our intuition knows far more than our rational mind. I feel like the rational mind is kind of just like how we piece things together after the fact. I mean, if we're following a process, then it can inform that process too. But especially with like the act of creativity and like living our lives, if it's not dependent on a system of rational thought already, then that's a space where our intuition and creative decisions, like where the other world can come through and inform based on its infinite capacity. So that's the front side. This is the back side. And we're just stitching it down. So the red reminds me of reminds me of blood. When blood touches the oxygen, it turns from blue to red, apparently. And that's why our veins are blue, or they appear to be blue in our skin when they're enclosed inside of us. And then so it makes me think of blood. It makes me think of fire. It makes me think of the earth, like the root chakra and our connection to the earth. And so that element coming in, kind of like our most like animist instincts. And our fight or flight mechanisms, surviving, and how like we need this connection to the earth and the actual ground beneath our skin. Like I was reading about how like the actual lands of where our ancestors originated. I mean, if you're a mix of a bunch of different things, then there's a bunch of different like consistencies of soil. There could be like really clay-based soil. It could be really minerally. It could be like chalk. It could be like dusty or flaky. And all sorts of colors too. And so just thinking about like how that plays into like where we feel at home in the world, the environment that our body is like resonant with, and like the qualities of our being that kind of reflects in our character. And so, and I think it's, even with all of that, like a lot of it is changing, but then there are still like regions and places to be restored. But then there's also the aspect of change, where not only are our environments changing, but humans are also changing. Like our makeup and how we adapt to things, especially stress, especially being in a culture where like it's so, we've been unearthing so many materials and resources. It's like from metals to oils, like all of these things are coming into, or have come into, our way of functioning. And so how is that affecting our psyches and our being, and how we're responding to all of that? Okay, so we have this binding. I think now would be a good time to iron. So I'm going to let the iron heat up while we look over here at Pipple. And if this is behind here, just pinning this on here like that so that we can get a sense of this draping situation. So when it's up here like this, it's like more like a visor, for it would be like a veil more from like things looking up onto it, and I kind of like that. Okay, I'm gonna press this. making sure to not undo any of those tiny seam allowances that we pressed along the edges of the flower. And also not putting the iron on the plastic, because I'm pretty sure that the plastic would melt if we did that. Which might be an interesting way to like mold it. Okay. So, So looking here at Pebble, there, okay. And then pinning this power button back on. Seems like the leaves are falling right below the ridgeline of this shirt. And maybe this binding could come down and bind the edge here. The veil is still like or do we want it to be more like that? Yeah, so that the veil is not just like poking upward. I like that. We might have to make some pleats in this flower up here. The petals are folding in on themselves or something. And then this lovely, it goes somewhere, not sure where, but I might need to change this location, but just so that it's like centered, if I want it to be centered, but yeah, I like that because it gives it some volume to where the flower is like landing up here so that it's not just because it's such a thin material, I think it wants to have movement. And so if it's not going to be able to be flowing in the wind, we might as well at least have it folded, or like expressing its volume somehow, expressing its body. Its essence, not just like what? I am forever flat. Okay. The other thing is that this, if only this would like reach down further. I feel like I want it to reach down. What happens when it's like inverted? Oh, that's nice too. And then it can come down. I do have all these other bags up here. Oh, I have another garlic bag actually. So do we want to attach it somehow? Look how it's like torn along. This, because it kind of has like a twist to it. One side is like twisted more. It's like going like this. It's like at a diagonal kind of twist, which makes sense because this netting, it's like it has like a crossover pattern, but one is like the diagonal going this direction is thicker. So it's gonna have more stability, but like if I were to attach something, I don't want it to be just like straight across. I want the overlap to have some sort of shape to it. Maybe like, first I'll cut this one and then I'm gonna overlap them. To see, do I have any more? I just have other colors. Like I have a red. Lots of red and purple. I like the pattern of this red one. Can you see that pattern? Will it focus onto my hand? Oh yeah, you can see now. Isn't that a cool pattern? And then the green here is like that. If you can see what I'm talking about with the, yeah. And then this one here is like pretty consistently the same in both directions, as far as I can tell. As far as my eyes can tell. Okay, so I think we're at a stopping point right now as we reflect on, or maybe just let these possibilities simmer in the ether, or whatever they're going to do. So thank you for tuning in today. And thank this plane of imagination for being here and for holding this space, this imaginative space. So we're going to close out